Some of us from the Abbey recently got back from a annual monastic gathering, and I hadn't been there for a while. It was lovely. I was asked to be on a panel there, and so I thought the next number of times I do BBCs, I would go over some of these things more than I did on the panel. It was like 10 minutes, and it was a lovely thing to think about. And so I thought I would just share part of it. The question that we were asked to think about was our personal practice path, what it looks like, and how does monastic life enhance that. And I think I'd have to say you wouldn't need to be a monastic for most of this to apply to you, because maybe some of it will, but some of it is just more about practice. And so when I thought about this question, I realized that I had kind of a basic perspective on my practice, because I thought about this for maybe 3 weeks or something. And so there's a sadhana I do daily that has this phrase in it that says, "After all my afflictions without exception have been pacified, may the fruition of my hopes be effortlessly and spontaneously achieved." And we also often say the 37 practices of a bodhisattva, and I think it's the next to the last verse that says, "In brief, whatever you are doing, ask yourself, what's the state of my mind? With constant mindfulness and mental alertness, accomplish others' good." And for me, those two kind of sum up how I think about practice in terms of what are the long-term aspirations that I have. To get rid of afflictions, to develop good qualities, to be able to accomplish the good of others, to be mindful, what's going on in my mind and how am I dealing with it. For me, on a day-to-day level, at my level of practice, something that, in order to cultivate these aspirations, one thing I have to work on fairly consistently, whether I'm thinking of it in these terms or not, is equanimity. This is this mind that actually can have a sense of affection for everyone. And one of my personal ways that I think about my practice is that at the time of death, I want to be able to see everyone as a friend when I'm in the bardo. And so I need to learn how to do that while I'm alive, not dying or in the bardo. And so what is it that gets in the way of that? Is in a sense. And for me, in order to even, like we study primarily the teachings of the Lam Rim, the Gradual Path to Awakening, and the Lojong, the mind training or thought transformation teachings here. And when I see what is getting in the way of that for me, I'm always aware that I have to keep my mind calm. And even now I'm more aware that I have to keep my body more calm to have any chance to be able to to live the way I want to live, to have these aspirations as a part of my life. So in our tradition, as everyone here is aware, we work on the learning about teachings and then contemplating them, which can include discussion. But in there, for me, that mostly means, I understand that mostly as understanding the meaning of the teachings. You're first kind of taking things in, and then you really have to think about these things and talk to people and understand the meaning. And then we eventually meditate on the teachings in order to integrate them into our life. And the point of all this is to increase our good qualities and to get rid of our unwholesome qualities. So what to adopt and what to abandon and how to go about it. And so I would say one approach that we take here at the Abbey as a group is working on the mental factors, identifying them in our mind and recognizing which ones are virtuous and which ones are not virtuous. And although we have a list of maybe 52 that we've worked with, I think we have another list of 80. I think from Nagarjuna, wasn't there like 80 things? And I don't know, there's a lot of them. But basically, we have many mental factors, whether they're on a list or not. And we learn to try to recognize them and enhance the ones that should be enhanced and get rid of the ones that shouldn't. And then in that process, we also learn which ones really help us. Like there's certain ones that particularly are useful for me when I have certain states of mind, and just in general, maybe because of my, the personality that I have constellated over this life and maybe from previous lives. So to do that, This also involves, I would say, a kind of reasoned faith, because our goals are so long term that we don't know a lot of these things. So we have to have some kind of energy to want to practice these things. And that, I think, is based on a kind of reasoned faith, which I think Nagarjuna expresses really well in Precious Garland. I think it's just verse 5 where he says, because one has faith, one partakes of the Dharma. And because one has wisdom, one truly understands. Of these two, wisdom is foremost, but faith must come first. In a lot of the lists we have in Buddhism, faith is at the beginning of these different factors that help you. And why is that? Because faith helps, a reasoned faith helps you to have energy, and you need that. Venerable Chodron said once that faith acts as the basis for generating aspiration for virtuous qualities. It's like the doorway through which all positive qualities manifest. And for me, that really rings true, and I find that have a very strong faith in the Buddhist teachings and in our capacity as human beings, actually, to develop really strong minds. Really, that's the word I use, really strong minds to deal with whatever comes up. This is one of my things that I have a lot of reasoned faith in. There's never a state of mind I've had that couldn't be benefited and worked with the Buddhist teachings. I'm not saying that I don't maybe need, and people don't need medications. I'm not saying people don't need psychotherapy or all other kinds of things to take care of their body, to take care of their biochemistry, whatever it is. We need a lot of things because we're very complex beings, physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, all that. We need all that. Our minds are very complex. But I also am saying that there's a place where working with my state of mind, there's never been maybe I can't put the teaching into practice very well. Maybe I have roadblocks there, but I find that that the answers are there. And I have a lot of faith in that. And then just kind of tying in monastic life, I would say monastic life for me in this regard has been quite a catalyst and a guide. And it's partly because we're such a group of people who have similar values and similar views, primarily, and outlook. We have the various harmonies that they talk about in the monastic tradition that we share. And so that creates this vessel for us as individuals to grow in. And for me, my monastic life has been in community, and it's the only monastic life I know. I've never lived as a monastic out of community. It's kind of a 24/7 endeavor. And so my experience with that has been that on the cushion and off the cushion have like equal value. I can't see, they're so interrelated that I can't actually even separate them at this point. Like what I do off the cushion is going to really dramatically affect what happens for me on the cushion, and vice versa. Maybe even off the cushion more at this point. So then when I was looking at, that's kind of my general take on my perspective on practice for myself. And then there were three things that I thought to share about, and I'll just do the first one today. Three things that really have guided me and supported me. I mean, there's many, our practices have many aspects. You could talk a lot, but I just wanted to pick three things for my 8 minutes, right? And the first one, I'm expanding them for this, but the first one was about role models. The second one was monastic community structure, and the third was what I'm calling slogans. But the role model one was really what came to my mind first, because before I was involved with Buddhist communities, that wasn't until 2000, but I was introduced to Buddhism even as a teenager and had an interest in it from that time until 2000. So I was the closet Buddhist who only read books, and I wouldn't have anything to do with organized religion. And so my first role models were not related to others, to people even so much. My first role model, I realized, was actually a poem by Lao Tzu that described the attributes of a spiritual practitioner. And I kind of want to think about this more, because I'm not sure if it's like the part of it seems a little idealistic to me at this point, but I'll read it to you anyway. It's a beautiful poem. It doesn't really have a title, but this translation is by Stephen Mitchell. And it says, "The ancient masters were profound and subtle. Their wisdom was unfathomable. There is no way to describe it. All we can describe is their appearance. They were careful as someone crossing an iced-over stream, alert as a warrior in enemy territory, courteous as a guest, fluid as melting ice, shapeable as a block of wood, receptive as a valley, clear as a glass of water." And this is the part that always stayed with me. "Do you have the patience to wait till your mind settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? The master doesn't seek fulfillment, not seeking, not expecting. She is present and can welcome all things." I would have to be enlightened probably to live up to that. But I think it's beautiful, and I find the images beautiful. I mean, think about it. Shapeable as a block of wood. Well, that's some effort there. But fluid as melting ice, courteous as a guest. I mean, they're just beautiful things to think about. And then that's the part on the patience. That part always stayed with me, that image of watching my mind be riled up and then knowing that the pollution in my mind, if I could just settle enough, it would calm down, and then I'd be able to see more clearly. That's what always really stayed with me. So that was my first real, I would say, always stuck with me role model. And then the second role models I had, or maybe even they were concurrent before I was formally involved with any organizations or anything, or teachers even, were statues and paintings of the Buddha. I think that really generated me an interest and also a vision of our potential, my own potential. It was so different from life as I knew it growing up in my life. Seeing a Buddha statue was outside the realm of, I had some experience from being in church sometimes of a kind of peacefulness. But mostly that was like herding cats to get 6 kids to church on Sunday, driving like 60 miles an hour in a 35 zone to get us on church on time. So it was always really kind of interesting trying to get our family to church. So and I was in a big family, so it was always a lot going on. So the calmness of a Buddha image for me was always quite striking. So that was another thing that I found to be a role model. And then later in life, there were spiritual teachers, and I see them as people that help me to see actually what qualities are possible and the things to cultivate. I mean, I'm always watching, especially because I live here, Venerable Chodron, and how she's doing things, and I learn a lot from that. I still do, and I always have. And what I realized as I was thinking about this over some weeks, that when I, seeing their good qualities, right? For me, the degree to which I've purified my mind is the degree to which I can see their good qualities. So that's been interesting. The onus is on myself. And another area where I really have learned a lot and still learn a lot is from just ordinary people. And I do see ordinary people as role models in the sense of, and first is when they flounder. When people flounder, I learn a lot by watching what happens with people. And what comes up for me usually is I'm inferring what might be going on for someone when they're struggling, and then watching the decisions they make and how it unfolds for them. And so what usually happens is something comes up for me, and it makes me think, wow, this must be how this person was feeling then. This must be something, I don't know for sure, but it just seems like what I'm dealing with in this moment is probably similar to what this person was dealing with. And I think to myself, do I want to do what they did in this situation? And I usually think, no, I need to figure out something different here. That didn't work so well for them, at least in the short term, what I was witnessing. And that this is a very strong learning for me, to actively choose a different response and to work with that. and to try to choose things that are in line with the Dharma. And then on the other side, I have role models, things that I've really learned from other people that are who are flourishing in ways they're flourishing. And one example of that is a man named Duke, who is at Airway Heights, and I've known him for 10 years. And I've watched him just blossom from someone who didn't speak for the first, I don't know, 2 or 4 years that I knew him. He'd come to the Buddhist group, he never said a word, at least 2 years, maybe 4. And then things have opened up for him. And I had a really interesting conversation with him maybe 2 years ago, and it really taught me a lot. His practice is one of gratitude. And I think it's the first thing he turns to minute after minute, day after day. And I've just watched the effect on him, and that's had a really powerful influence on me. And and so that's, to me, the way a role model works, is they influence you in a positive direction. So those were the things I thought about first.